Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'll be going over my usual review of Prime Minister's questions, focusing largely on a couple of things like Boris Johnson's statement before the House, which I'll get onto, Labour leader Keir Starmer's questions as well, but also Ian Blackford for the SNP too. And this one promised to be an explosive one right from the outset. Keir Starmer, of course, is a former prosecutor. And here he was going to inevitably be asking questions about what amounts to potentially a criminal act on the part of the Prime Minister. The only difficulty for Starmer was there were so many lines of attack. There's Johnson's rule-breaking parties and associated lies in Parliament. If that scandal hadn't broken this week, it probably would have been the refusal to do anything to help ease the rising cost of living. But there was also the news breaking, which I'll be discussing soon, that the High Court have decided that actually the government did break the law with their dodgy PPE contracts as well. But Starmer has 6 questions, can't afford to spread them out too thinly, so he has to take one focus. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this isn't a formal criminal trial, of course. There's no judge, there's no jury as such. However, Starmer's task was still that of as he would have done in his days as a prosecutor, it's to explain to people without legal training, i.e. us, the members of the public, and potentially other MPs, how the defendant has broken the rules in a way that is easily understood. Johnson, before anyone got to ask any questions, made a statement. He tried to deflect the coming inquisition with that prepared statement. He switched from denial to accepting that the event, at least this one, took place, and that maybe it looked like it broke some rules. That being said, he did try to claim that he didn't realise it was a party. He thought it was a work event. This thing where people were invited to bring their own booze and didn't even begin until 6 p.m. in the evening. Now, at this point, I'm going to defer to an actual legal expert on the lawyered nature of the statement he gave. Johnson's dilemma, as I described yesterday, is that on the one hand, he doesn't want these scandals to keep damaging him and the Conservative Party because he doesn't actually want to resign just yet. On the other hand, accepting what happened and apologising not only puts more pressure on him to resign, especially after denying it for so long, but also opens the way for a criminal investigation. So according to human rights lawyer Adam Wagner, he prepared a statement that makes it sound like the event was actually within the rules, even though the general public are not of that opinion. He's basically saying, look, you may think you know what the rules were, but if you actually look at the wording, it was okay, even though it may have been a bit insensitive and we probably shouldn't have done it. He said this knowing full well that people would not go and look up the wording. But as I've repeatedly said, including yesterday, the law explicitly banned this sort of event, even if you tried to link it to work. The fact that it was for work was irrelevant. Gatherings of any kind, including for work, were banned unless they were essential for the purposes of work. No work that anyone in Downing Street undertakes requires them to be boozing in the garden, whether in the afternoon or in the evening. So the actual event wasn't a necessary part of their work. The statement is intended to allow Johnson to continue denying responsibility for what may be a criminal act, but also try and dial down the political pressure by getting members of the public to begrudgingly accept that maybe it was a selfish thing to do, but not necessarily an unlawful thing to do. It was, though. But anyway, on to Starmer's questions. I'll give you the gist. Starmer used all 6 questions, of course, to hammer Johnson on this major source of vulnerability now. Were it not for this revelation, as I say, the subject would probably have been the government's refusal to help on the rising cost of living. Labour put a few motions to Parliament this week and the Tories voted them down. But that can easily wait till next week. Because unless there's another political time bomb about to go off, then that can come later. Starmer was a lot more robust about the need for Johnson to resign now as well. So this was a shift in position. The Labour leader and most of his front bench have tended to put the pressure on Conservative MPs for getting Johnson to step down. When they've been asked, should Boris Johnson resign, it's tended to be, well, we can't make him resign. It's Conservative MPs who should really be considering his position. But this latest revelation put the whole issue beyond doubt. Starmer ridiculed the fact that Johnson's defence was essentially to accept that, yes, he was at a party. I appeared to have been at a party. I didn't know I was at a party. He called for Johnson to resign. First question. Naturally, Johnson declined this kind offer and suggested that we wait for the inquiry that Sue Gray is taking part in to conclude. Now, this is something else Johnson has tried to use to deflect questions. Thing is, if there's a criminal investigation going on, which of course there should be, if there's a criminal investigation going on, yes, of course, you're not supposed to comment. No comment is a thing. Sorry, it's police investigation, I can't comment. Yeah, we get that. This is an in-house investigation run by someone who was invited to this very party, chosen personally by the Prime Minister to cover it all up for him. And she's not the first person to have headed up this investigation. The original head of this investigation was someone who, it transpired, not only attended a party, but hosted one of the parties. This one has merely been invited to them, but she still knew about them. Regardless of the general respect that Sue Gray may have amongst those in politics as being generally a decent sort, nobody expects her to prepare a report that damns Johnson. So because it is an in-house inquiry set up by Boris Johnson, there's no problem with him commenting on it at all. Starmer later said that the public think that the Prime Minister is lying through his teeth. Load of Tory MPs spat their dummies out. Went, oh, no, he said he's lying. To which the Speaker had to point out that he was describing what the public think, not what he thinks. And I've said it before. You know, when people say, oh, how come you can't call the Prime Minister a liar when he's clearly a liar? You can. You can do it. You can do it in Parliament. It's child's play to accuse the Prime Minister of lying. You're just not allowed to do it directly. You have to use the right language, that's all. The language is there to use. Starmer then went on to describe harrowing stories of people who had lost loved ones and were not able to be with them, and what they thought about Johnson's behaviour. You know, they died alone because of the rules that Johnson was allowing others to flaunt. And let me just show you the impact of the exchanges, because it can sometimes be tricky to describe. Partway through, I think it was after the third question, as Johnson was trying to defend his position, bungling his lines as he did so, Starmer looked like this. Now, this is a lawyer. If you're in court being prosecuted and the guy prosecuting you looks like this whilst you are trying to explain to the court how you're not guilty, I don't think that's a good sign. In contrast, when Boris Johnson spoke, he was very subdued. None of his usual bravado, usually just tries to brazen it all out and shout about all sorts of things and go off on a tangent. He was doing his best to appear contrite, apologetic. Without actually apologising at all, of course, but he clearly understands just how serious the situation is and how the public are viewing it, including, crucially, the sections of the public that he needs the support of if he is still deluded enough to think that he'll be contesting the next election. Now, Boris Johnson is a vain, egotistical man. We know from past experience he doesn't apologise or admit errors, doesn't like to. Why should he? He's infallible. Such an incredibly conceited person does not enjoy even being made to pretend to sound sorry. And this image shows you exactly what he thought of the whole affair. This is what he looked like when he sat down after Starmer's 6 questions. Absolutely seething. Then on to Ian Blackford of the SNP. Naturally, he went with the same line and was met with the same response. Oh, yeah. But you need to wait for the inquiry. That's all Johnson has now. His position has shifted from there was no party to I didn't know about any parties to I seem to have inadvertently attended at least one party, but I didn't realise it was a party. That's Johnson's line. I'm so dumb that I couldn't recognise a party if I was in the middle of a conga line. So we need to wait for Sue Gray to tell me if I was actually at a party or not. It's our Prime Minister's defence that he is actually a complete moron. At this point, I'd accept the defence and dismiss him on the basis that a country should not be run by a moron. In reality, of course, it's not brains as such that the Prime Minister lacks. As Blackford put it, the PM has no shame. He also repeated his line from previous PMQs that Starmer echoed today as well, that Tory MPs must remove him if Johnson does not willingly go. Johnson again put on a show of contrition, but stuck to his new line. Naturally, opposition MPs are not going to wait for this sham of an inquiry. It's run by someone that Johnson appointed. It's run by someone who knew about at least one party because she was invited to it. We also do not know how long it will take. In theory, with each new revelation, there's another event to investigate. If it turns out there were dozens of parties, and I think we know about 11 now, then it could take years to pretend to investigate. In terms of the political fallout from this, there are two aspects to consider. There's the damage to Boris Johnson personally, and then there's the damage to the wider Conservative Party. In terms of the damage to Johnson, immense of course, he is now directly implicated in a way that can no longer be denied. He's had to switch to just thinking it was fine, or indeed it was fine, but we're all too thick to understand the law. He's not apologised for the event as such. He's apologising for appearing to have done something wrong in the eyes of thick as pig shit voters. But Johnson had already been mortally wounded by prior events, so this latest one hardly matters. It's a little bit like punching a man in the face when they have a huge hole in their chest. The damage to the wider Conservative Party will be key, because like I've said before, if it just damages Johnson, Tory MPs can afford to keep him in place for longer, wait for him to take even more damage from other things that are going on, then get a new guy in, and then he or she will have a clean slate, go into the next election. Fine. If it is damaging the wider party, however, they may have to act sooner. We'll have to consider how polling says that this is going on. The polling that takes place after this PMQs and the media that will be coming out today. But I would think this is now damaging more than just Johnson. The refusal of Tory MPs to remove the Prime Minister is damaging their reputation in public. And how do I know this? Because Starmer is now calling very forcefully for Johnson's removal. And he's implicating Tory MPs in keeping the unfit Prime Minister in place even louder than before. Now, I've said before, Labour need to avoid Johnson being the focus for these scandals, because if that happens, then when he goes, so too do the scandals. They need all Tory MPs to share in the blame for their part in accepting it and covering it up and defending Johnson. That Starmer is now calling in Parliament for Johnson to go directly is because he is convinced that the rot has now spread beyond Johnson to the wider party. I gather that the number of letters of no confidence from Tory MPs is not that far off the 54 required. Doesn't mean it will tip soon. We're dealing with Tory MPs here, each of them individually carrying out their own personal political calculations, and many of them will not necessarily be making the right calculations. He could face a leadership challenge by the weekend, or it might not be for months. But it does seem that we now have a situation whereby these scandals are making other Conservative MPs look bad for their silent support of the Prime Minister and his antics. So each new one that arrives may well bring his day of reckoning closer. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.